Does your business provide a quality service or product? If the answer is yes, then there is a combination of tactics that can be customized to fit your unique business that makes your business super profitable, creates wealth, and makes a difference in the process. I know this because I've built a few tiny businesses to more than $70 million. You're listening to the Entrepreneurs Radio Show. Conversations with self-made millionaires and high-level entrepreneurs that will grow your business. Hey, it's Travis Lane Jenkins. Welcome to episode number 117 of the Entrepreneurs Radio Show, a production of RockstarEntrepreneurNetwork.com, where each and every week I'm going to connect you with rockstar entrepreneurs that explain their journey to success, including their failures, and what's been the key principles to finding that high level of success as an entrepreneur, so that you can see that successful entrepreneurs are really just everyday people that stayed committed to taking constant focused action each and every day. Now, today I'm going to introduce you to Dan Schawbel. Dan was named to Inc. magazine 30 Under 30 list in 2010, the Forbes magazine 30 Under 30 list in 2012, and Forbes top 20 social media influencers list in 2013. Business Week cites him as someone entrepreneurs should follow on Twitter. He's been featured on over 1,300 media outlets, such as Wired Magazine, The Today Show, Street Signs, on NBC, the Nightly Business Report, and I could go on with a list of accolades that he's accomplished. But I just want to make it clear to you that, as always, there's going to be lots of great value for you in this episode. Now, before we get started, I want to say thank you to Fishman Brad. They're on iTunes. Thanks for the 5-star written review. His review said, I first started listening to this podcast about a month ago, and I keep finding myself going back for more and more. Brad says that he's gotten to the point where he's realized that he cannot do everything all the time. He also said that this podcast has helped him find the courage to start asking for help and not be embarrassed about the mistakes that he's made. He also recommended to not be afraid to ask for help. There's always someone out there willing to guide you in the right direction. And then he says, please keep the podcast going. They've helped me, and I can guarantee thousands of others. Brad, thanks for the great feedback. I'm super excited that they're giving you so much value and direction for your business. Keep it up, my friend. That's exactly what these podcasts were designed for. So I love the fact that you're taking action based on the things that we're talking about and the things that you're taking from each of the show. Now, if you have time and you find value in the show, I'd really appreciate it if you'd go and leave us a review and just tell us how we're doing. And, of course, I'll recognize you on air and say thank you. One last thing, you can take these podcasts with you on the go through iTunes, Android, or Stitcher. Just go to RockstarEntrepreneurNetwork.com. Click on the icon right there on the menu bar for either iTunes, Android, or Stitcher. And it will take you directly to the show. Now that we've got all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get down to business. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Travis.
Yeah, you bet. I'm excited to spend some time with you. Hey, I'm curious. You're a young guy, and you've accomplished some pretty impressive stuff in the short amount of time that you've been in business. Do you mind sharing that backstory?
Absolutely. Well, I've been working since I was 13. I had my first internship in high school after being a camp counselor for 2 years. And then I had 7 more internships in college. And I got the first few internships through my father's connections, and then all the other ones, since then I've kind of earned on my own. And during that time, I kind of learned how to market myself. I was creating websites, for hobbies. I was always, from middle school to high school, creating websites like, a message board for my friends or a James Bond hobby site. I was just learning on my own, basically, and then watching two of my closest friends at that time use Photoshop and do videos and basically, really involve themselves in the media, and I learned all of that through them. And then getting a job after college was difficult for me because I didn't really learn how to network. So I had all these internships. I had my own small business doing websites and graphic design for other small businesses outside the Boston area. And I was just like really, clueless on how to get a job because there's so much competition for marketing jobs back then, and there's even more now.
Right.
And so I really clamped it down and I said, what companies do I want to work for? And I narrowed it down to EMC Corporation, which is a Fortune 200 technology company. And then I went all in. And that's kind of how I've always been. When I was choosing what college I wanted to go to, it was Bentley. And even though I applied for other colleges, I didn't really care about the other colleges. So I didn't get an early decision at Bentley, and I fought to get in. I did an interview on campus. I wrote them a letter. I got straight A's my last semester. I just did whatever it took to get in. I had an internship in high school, so that differentiated me. And then for college, to get a job when I graduated, 7 leadership positions in organizations, my own business, 8 internships, straight A's, everything. And it still took me, months to get a job when I graduated. So I started 6 months before I graduated to try and get a job. And what I noticed during the interview process for EMC, and I met 15 people for 3 different positions, and I finally got one job. And the last set of interviews for that job, they were looking at my resume, and their eyes stopped at Reebok because I had an internship at Reebok and a lot of smaller companies. Mm-hmm. But they were familiar with Reebok. That stood out to them. Because Reebok was a brand they were familiar with, they were interested in that, and that lended to my credibility. And in that moment, that one moment changed my whole view of life and the workplace and getting ahead in careers, because brands open doors.
Right.
You build your own brand in your career or your business because you're aligned with something that people have heard of before. Whether you get someone famous on your board of a company, or you worked at a company that people are familiar with, branding is really the essential key to opening the doors for your career. And so I got the job from there, and then I started my first blog in end of 2006 called Driven to Succeed. And I was posting several times a week. No one was reading it. I wasn't really marketing it. It was just kind of for fun and to get my ideas out there, really basic ideas on networking and job hunts and internships and business. And then it wasn't until March 14, 2007 when I read Tom Peters' famous article, The Brand Called You, which is the reason why Fast Company magazine has taken off and now has 800,000 subscribers. Is because Tom Peters wrote this massive article about the brand called you and how at the end of the day, success lies in your hands. And he said something, as part of the article that really transformed everything for me. He said the smartest workers at a company are able to create their own unique position and give a unique value to the company.
Right.
So that night I started a blog called Personal Branding Blog, which you're probably familiar with at this point. Mm-hmm. And then within 6 months I was blogging 12 times a week. I was networking. I was writing articles for magazines. I was doing an online TV show. I held the Personal Brand Awards. I was doing a 6 Sigma Green Belt on top of 50 hours at EMC. So I was working over 100 hours a week. My key philosophy was if I sacrifice all this time now, it'll position me for future opportunities, and I'll thank myself later, which I do now, big time.
Right.
And I was doing all this. I started my own magazine. I had Donald Trump on the first issue, and it was just building and building and building. And then after 6 months, this was August 1st, 2007, Fast Company profiled me, and that changed everything. So if you get profiled back then, it's much more impact because it was less competition for media. So any profile is going to get a lot more eyes back then. And so Google invited me to speak at their headquarters. EMC got wind of it, sent it to the vice president there. I got called into her office. I was able to create the first social media position in a Fortune 200 company back in 2007. Now everyone has these types of positions at big companies. So many agencies and everything now. But I did this, and I really followed what Tom Peters said. He's like, create your own unique position. And that's what I did. And I became so valuable to the company. I was the social media resource for the company worldwide. So people in all the different divisions and in the different acquisitions, they would contact me to learn about how social media could impact their specific area. And so I went from someone who came into work being like, oh, what do I have to do today, to somebody who everyone was trying to clamor for, to ask, how can we best utilize your skills to advance, our department, our business, our product, our services. So that was really powerful, and that inspired me to go through the hell of trying to get a book published. I got rejected by 70 agents and 2 publishers. Got the book deal of my own in January 2008. And then I learned from one of my mentors, David Meerman Scott, that the publisher's not going to do any of the marketing and selling for you like it probably was 50 years ago.
Right.
Now you're in the hot seat. You have to do everything. You have to be the chief marketing officer of your own brand and of your own product. And so that's what I did. And so I made the book successful when it came out. Now that book is in 13 languages and sold tens of thousands of copies. And it's in 2 editions. And so really worked hard on that one. And then that created the demand and the credibility. Even at my young age, I was 25 when it came out. Started writing when I was 23. And then that launched the first area of my business of millennial branding was the one-to-one coaching, helping executives, authors, entrepreneurs build their own brands using social network tools. Basically, a lot of the things I would do for myself and EMC, because that's why EMC hired me for that position, to do what I did for myself but for the company. So, Facebook.com/EMC Corporation, like all of those accounts that I created back then, which is kind of cool to look at because now they have like a lot of, fans and followers, etc. And so, from there, I've kind of gone in a different path. So I spent, 5+ years on the personal branding component, especially for the younger generation. And then I swapped. And now I'm kind of building off of that, and I'm going from Me 2.0, which was how to use the social networks to find employment and build your career, to Promote Yourself, which just came out in September, which is more about millennials, the future workplace, and going from your first day at work to management roles. And so I've built the next phase of my career for the past 2 to 3 years on research. So I've done 16 research studies, and I'm releasing my 17th research study in September with the paperback edition of Promote Yourself, where I examined millennials and then Generation Z across 10 different countries and what their workplace preferences are. So that's going to be a landmark study because no one's done it before, which is really exciting. It's taken me 8 months plus to kind of pan that out, get the funding and do the research analysis. So one of the ways I battled my youth at a young age was I would show secondary research. You don't trust me, I'm young, well, here's the research from all these other sources. And now it's not even just the secondary resources, it's like I'm actually doing all this research. So, I'm trying to basically make myself bulletproof on topics that I really care about and think that are important. And all my topics fall under one umbrella, right. And that is employment.
Right.
Because that's such a huge issue now. And that's why a lot of this stuff is taken off, because when my first book came out, it was the economic issues we had and people were not finding jobs. And then the second book came out, it's still, people are trying to build themselves up through the economic collapse. So I'm trying to figure this all out for people, put all the pieces together, and help people help at least especially my generation go from college to CEO. So If you think about it, Me 2.0 was college the first job, Promote Yourself, first job to management, and then the next book will eventually be management to executive CEO level.
Right. So let me go back a little bit. There's a lot to cover here. So you said the pivot point was whenever they noticed Reebok on your list there. Now, how did you know that they noticed that? Did they verbalize that to you, or did you just pick up on a cue? Give me some insight on that.
Sure. So if you think about, this guy, I think his name was David, one of the people who were interviewing me, his eyes were going down this huge resume, I had a 2-page resume, through all the internships, and then he got to Reebok, he stopped, and he said, "Oh, you worked at Reebok, what was that like?" Right. And what's interesting about this, Travis, is that, I really didn't do that much at Reebok. If you're in marketing, if you're an unpaid marketing intern at Reebok, you're doing nothing. You get no opportunities. Right. All the cool work's done by the managers, directors, etc. So I did almost nothing there, but the name is so strong that it helped so much. And I did so much more work at the smaller companies where I get to do so many different things, and there's only like 6 people at some of these smaller companies. So that brand carries that much weight. And so one of the things that I tell people, if they're not already starting a business, when they're in college and whatnot, is try and work for a brand name company when you graduate, because that brand will help you throughout the rest of your life. If you look at my bio, it's very strategic. There's almost every sentence has at least one brand in it. Because again, if you don't know who I am, you definitely know who Time Warner is, the New York Times is, etc. So it kind of protects me in a way. It's kind of like a shell around me where people can't poke at it and say, oh, who are you? Or what do you know? Because there's so many brands tied around me at this point that it's almost my protection. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, it's credibility and positioning, right? And so I know your audience is speaking really to a different demographic than the show is. Everybody are entrepreneurs on this show, although there's lessons to learn in the way that you've done this, because the way that you've positioned yourself is really part of the strategic ways that businesses position themselves. And just like you said, when you don't have credibility, when you're even creating a case study, you have to cite believable, reliable, trusted resources, so that, because everyone's constantly thinking as they're listening to someone speak about a product or a service or an offering or whatever, there's not much trust out there, right? And so you want them to set that distrust aside and focus on the message. And the only way you can do that, if you don't have a strong presence in that market, is cite credible resources, right? And so you obviously already understood that. And one of the underpinnings that I see going on here with you is you understand the value of earned media over paid media, because almost, now it may have been a necessity thing in the very beginning. Did almost everything, the Forbes 30 Under 30, Inc. magazine. Now, I don't know what order these things come to you in. One normally leads to another, to another, to another. But was it your objective to go after earned media? And do you have any paid media, or kind of explain that strategy to me?
Yeah, no, I've never done any paid media, and I never understood PR. I never understood any of this. I never thought I was a writer. Basically, this is just all stemmed from my love of the topic and the importance I put on it, especially for my generation. But everything I write supports my generation, but can be used and leveraged for everyone. And that's kind of why my books are read by people of all generations. And it's also the new way of thinking. And so the way I've done it is I fell into it in a sense, where I started the blog, and then I'm curious to see maybe if I can write or get press or whatnot. So I started pitching. And then because the first press I got from Fast Company had such a huge impact on my career, I was kind of seduced by it, and I still kind of am. I'm like, wow, if that one piece of press can completely change my world in that big of a way, then what if I get more?
Right.
So a lot of this is that, I was also really young, when I got this, like 23, 24, and I was naturally curious about the impact certain things I was doing would have on my life, my career, the people around me, and I still am. You know what I mean? I'm still like, wow, if I'm on this podcast, what if this person's watching and then that turns out to be $10,000? Right. Or what if they know someone, they recommend this? You just don't know the circumstances. So when people, especially publishers, are like, what do you do that actually sells books? I always say everything, because you just don't know if a podcast, an article, a TV segment, or whatnot is going to result in something bigger or bigger sales or opportunities. You don't know. So it's like, people who put all their eggs in one basket, that's not a good strategy. But also being specific about what you're trying to do. So my positioning, I think, is part of the reason why I've won. I think my love for networking and understanding that it's not about just, do for me, do for me, do for me, and just give, and, I just give and give and give and then ask for something in return. I think that's really the core of what I've done, because I used to, be afraid of networking, and then I figured out that if you help other people out before asking for anything in return, that's part of the secret. So I think that's one important secret, and I think the other one is positioning, like you were saying before, where, I'm not just trying to be everything to everyone. I'm picking an audience, and I'm trying to be the smartest, most best person on the topics that matter to that audience and that I care about.
Right.
So personal branding for Gen Y. There was no one else doing it back then. That to me was obvious. I was passionate about it. I was going to outwork anyone, and so I positioned myself on there. And then the next one is millennials in the workplace. Not a lot of competition there. I'm a millennial. I was in the workplace, so I can relate to them. And so that's a good progression for me. So it's not like I'm randomly choosing things to do.
Right.
I'm choosing things that allow me to create a broader story. For instance, the research I did with American Express for Promote Yourself, that gives you a view of millennials and their managers. The next study is Generation Z, who's not in the workplace, and millennials who are in the workplace, and trying to figure out those relationships. So it allows me to tie a bigger story. It's like, what do millennials feel about, what do Gen Z feel about millennials, and what do millennials feel about, Gen X and boomers, and then connecting all of that together to formulate, different ideas and different solutions for companies. So my model is coming up with ideas. So ideas are the cornerstone of everything I do. If I'm not thinking of new ideas, I'm irrelevant completely. So new ideas, research to prove the ideas, PR and marketing campaigns to get the ideas out there, and then consulting and speaking in order to work with companies to help them solve those ideas and problems at their companies.
As you're talking and as I'm looking, I love to put pieces of a puzzle together, and I have a burning desire to understand why, and that's a big part of what's made me successful is my curiosity. It's also what gets me in trouble at times too, but it just is what it is. In observing you and listening to everything, one thing that is becoming obvious to me, and I think you already know this, although I'd be interested to know if you are completely aware of it. I think you have figured out how to overcome fear, because you said something that clues me into this suspicion. Is you said you say yes to everything. Now, that's an intimidating thing to do. That's a scary thing to do. You come on this show, we have no script. And you have to know your stuff cold to be able to talk with no script. And that really scares a lot of people. And imagine if we were doing this live on a stage. And I know you've done things like that. So are you aware that you've managed to overcome a big element of fear that hold a lot of people back?
I mean, there's two good examples for you. The first one is public speaking. I was petrified when I was a sophomore. We had sophomore speech in high school, and then I had to speak in front of 30 people about affirmative action, and I got sick the night before. I was petrified of it. And then I just worked at it and worked at it and worked at it and worked at it over the years. Again, figured out the topics I really care about, made it easier, and now I'm speaking over 1,000 people at once. So I think you can definitely overcome it. And the other thing is, I do recognize that no matter how successful you are, you're still going to have like these huge obstacles. So for me, it's about trying to get people to buy into what I'm trying to do. For instance, again, the first book, rejected by 70 agents and 2 publishers, kept going. The second book, 3.5 years, fired 2 agents, hired 4 consultants, 3 book proposals, almost didn't get it, worked extremely hard on a ridiculous marketing plan. They upgraded the book to hardcover, again, I did the whole campaign. Book comes out on September 3rd last year. Sells thousands of copies, becomes a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, and then 2 days later, or 1 day later, I'm in Times Square, at my huge book launch sponsored by Ernst & Young. 2 days later, I turned 30. So it's like this huge epic thing that happened to me because I didn't give up and I really invested, and I understand one principle that is so key, especially in publishing, is nobody will invest in you unless you invest in yourself first. And so that principle is so, so important,
right?
Especially in the arts. So music and any of that, you have to do it for yourself first and really push through. And even today, so for this global study I did, I pitched 150 companies and got rejected 149 times.
Right.
So to go through that amount of rejection doesn't bother you anymore after that point. And this has been my whole life too. I mean, no one used to answer my emails back in 2006, 2007.
Right.
But to go through 150 pitches and only one saying yes, but that one yes is all that matters. This is what I tell young people now when I coach them and I mentor them is, who cares? All you need is one yes, because you can build so much from that one yes. That one yes changes everything for you.
Right.
So it's worth the fight.
Right. Hey, I'm curious. One way I learned to deal, the fight or flight natural thing that your body does, right?
Yeah.
When you go on live in 5, 4, 3, and there's a surge. There's been a surge of energy the last 30 minutes building up to it, right? And it's you're at a point to where you could get sick, like you were talking about, and so I've learned to program myself as when that comes on, instead of it being a negative thing, I've taught myself to say, oh, good stuff's about to happen, right? I've kind of reprogrammed myself. And so it's not necessarily this fight or flight thing as much as an excitement about what's going to happen. And so I've learned to channel it. Have you done a little game like that with yourself?
It's more about that if I'm going to, pitch 150 companies, it has to be something I'm so convinced is going to be successful that I'm willing to put up with that amount of rejection. Mm-hmm. That to me, that's my secret. Mm-hmm. And because I've done it before. I've gotten rejected and things have happened. So I know that it will happen. And even, honestly, I tried to do a huge national speaking tour and get the companies to sponsor that, and that flopped. And I pitched 80 companies and it didn't work. And to me, I put a hold on that one because I'm like, you know what? I'm going to keep building. I'm going to keep building the presence, building credibility. And then I'm going to go back to all those companies and every, 1 to 2 years just keep going and going and going. And then hopefully someday they say yes. There's no guarantee though. But what's the worst that can happen is you spend, X amount of hours trying to do it and you get no result. So, you play with these things in your head. But I just know, again, I've been through this so many times that one yes, just that one yes. And when you get that one yes, it feels so much better than if it's just given to you, if it was so easy, everyone would do it and you wouldn't care as much about it. But because I'm literally fighting day in and day out to make certain things happen, once it actually happens, it's tremendous. And then I end up, because I know if I'm working on a new project, it's going to be successful. It's not about being cocky. It's because good track record, I know what I'm doing, got the connections, everything's lined up for me. So I know that any company that works with me is going to win. And then other companies will see that, and eventually, who knows when it's going to be, when I'm 40 years old, it'll be a little bit easier and I'll get a little bit fewer rejections. I'm not really sure. But I've been doing this for over 7 years, and it's still a lot of rejections. Maybe to get the third book deal, even after all the success, it could be even more rejections. I'm prepared for that, and I'm fine with that at this point. I've kind of come to grips with the new reality of the industries I'm heading into with media and speaking, which are two of the most hardest industries right now because so many books, so many people think they're speakers. People have to compete at such a higher level now because, you have to break through the clutter and compete against unlimited amounts of people.
Tons and tons of people out there talking on very similar subjects these days.
Yeah, so you have to focus, you have to position yourself, and you got to double down on things you really care about, and then hopefully, certain things work out, and those create opportunities so you can, live and thrive in your world.
Yeah, what I've found is earned media has, if I had to put a number to it, I would say maybe an impact of tenfold of paid media. Now, I'm a fan of paid media also because you can control it. And a lot of times a business needs to be able to turn volume on and off like a light switch, because sometimes not being able to meet demand can cause a bad reputation for you also. So you can turn it on and off. Whereas unpaid media, even SEO or other forms that are not controllable like that, can overwhelm you, and you can't keep up with things. Now, that's a good problem, but it is a problem. And so there's, kind of the counterbalance. But the earned media has so much more power behind it, because it's almost as if the magazine or the source is putting their stamp of approval on you. So I would put I'd put it a multiplier of maybe tenfold. I don't know if I put that in there or not.
Well,
I think I was leading up to it.
It goes back to the same thing we were talking about is, if you're just, John Smith, owner of XYZ company, that's great, but people are probably not going to look, too highly at you and give you a chance. But if you're, John Smith, CEO of some company that was featured in 2 different publications that people have heard of, then people start to care a little bit more.
Right. So starting today, what does a business owner, in your opinion, need to do to get the type of credibility and recognition? Maybe they don't have the amount of time. You've invested an incredible amount of times, over 1,000 interviews, right? Is that right?
1,300.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and that's an incredible amount of time dedicated to that. And most people can't dedicate that kind of time. But what do you feel like would be the 3 or 4 or 5 key things that a business owner should do to position themselves using some of the strategies that you've used?
Yeah, I mean, one is take a niche, as in don't try and be everything to everyone. You'll be nothing to no one. Really focus on a specific market that can best use your product or service, and you can almost ignore everyone else.
Right.
I think the second one is you need, and this is what's really hard, you have to be a content creator. You have to be able to produce content and really publish that online and push it out to certain publications that your audience is in tune to, so you can reach them. And we're in a new world now where you can, all these outlets, they need as much content as possible in order to make more money. So if you write byline articles and you're okay with that, you can get published at some of these Fast Companies and Forbes and all these outlets that you probably couldn't have 5 years ago. There's a lot more opportunities for byline articles now. I'm writing several right now for my September launch. That's a huge opportunity. I would say that partnerships are really important. So if you don't have all the resources, obviously you can outsource, but partner with other companies that don't compete with you, but sell to the same people you're trying to sell to. I think partnerships over the years have been, much easier to obtain, and people are more welcoming of it because there's so much competition. In order to kind of break through the noise, having other resources can help you and enable that.
So partner maybe with vendors or someone that is, they're the vertical that is just before you. Partner with them and come up with a content strategy. Yeah,
and then network, right? So anyone who is a kind of a gatekeeper in your world, or somebody that is somewhat influential, invite them to events, get out there, meet them, promote them, do whatever you have to do to get in front of them. I mean, part of my thing is, if I help everyone else first with their books, they'll want to help me out with my book.
Right.
And that's why I don't publish a book every year, because I need enough years between books in order to help out enough people. So when the next book comes out, it's that much bigger.
Right. Do you ever struggle with finding good topics for your content?
I do now. I mean, I'm pretty burned out. I've written over 1,000 articles since 2007, and it's definitely getting harder. And the way I do it is I just base them around the new research I'm doing. That's what keeps. So I don't write as many articles on a weekly basis. It's more about, I do 6 research studies a year. I take elements of the findings of each study, and then those become articles that I write. So it's more driven, because then I win twofold. Then it's not just, I'm out there and people see an article I've written, but I'm also getting the research out there, which shows credibility and supports the companies that sponsor the research.
Right. And so how do you, it becomes difficult to keep up with all of your content because, and I'm speaking for myself here too. I've got to keep a core library of what I wrote on, so that I don't cover the topic too closely or too repetitively. Sometimes you can slice a topic and really drive important points home on 4 different angles, right? But you need to keep track of what you have written and what you're missing, and that becomes a system into itself. Also, have you built out a system to stay on top of those things?
No, I mean my content development has gone way down. I don't really even update Facebook or the social networks as much anymore, because to me my model has changed. So it's less about one-on-one consulting and more about selling to execs in the HR department and TV producers, and I'd rather just connect with them directly through email. It's just more effective for me. So, or just on Twitter, because they're all on Twitter for journalists. Otherwise, it's just no real value for me, to be honest, because it's not. It's smart for people whose models are selling products,
right?
As in, you've written 5 ebooks or an online course or something, because then you're selling to the individual. But if you're selling to companies, it's not as impactful, in my opinion. And I've been in the game since the beginning, and it's really competitive too, right? So, people are following thousands and thousands of people on Twitter or Facebook, and so your content is really not seen unless you pay for it. For Facebook, only less than 10% of your posts are seen by your followers unless you put money up. It's all pay to play now, and so for me, I'd rather, because of my model, I'd rather reach out to the exact decision makers and then see what happens.
It's precise. I like that approach. You'd be surprised. Many people go 20 years without ever figuring out how to get that precise. It saves you a fortune on marketing if you can do that within your market, right?
Absolutely.
Let me ask you, what book or program made an impact on you related to business that you'd recommend and why? You may have already told me what it was.
Yeah, so the article, The Brand Called You by Tom Peters, has completely changed my life. He's the most influential figure in my life.
Right.
There's a lot of different books. To Sell is Human by Dan Pink. I think Dan Pink's amazing. He's someone I look up to. I would say Now Discover Your Strengths by Marcus Buckingham. He wrote the foreword for my book. He's incredible. I would say Strength Finder by Tom Rath. He's another person who mentors me. They're all like rock stars. So the people that I look up to, I think their books are, extremely valuable for the building blocks of what it takes to be successful, whether it's, working for a company or starting your own company, because it really is about your strengths. So I'm weak in a lot of areas and I avoid those areas. It's a waste of my time. I'd rather just double down on my strengths, like Marcus would say, and focus solely on things that I really care about, I have the knowledge in, I'm best positioned to take advantage of.
Right. I really like Daniel Pink's angle on a lot of things.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite tools or pieces of technology that you've recently discovered, if any, that you'd recommend to other business owners, and why?
It's a great question. I'm really basic with technology. So I don't really use that many tools. I'm all about the basics. So I guess the latest one that I'm starting to use is Google Calendar, just because it syncs with my phone. I know it's funny because I'm a millennial. I'm only 30 years old.
Right.
But I don't like to, unless the technology is really going to help me, like Uber I use, unless OpenTable I like a lot I use. But unless it's really going to help me, I'm not going to just use it for the sake of using it, and that's why I think a lot of these apps and a lot of these companies fail, is because it seems really cool in the beginning, and then you ask yourself, do I really need this? It could be a complete waste of time for me.
Yeah, good perspective. Interesting. I find that.
More.
Yeah, I find that surprising coming from a guy your age. But, I like it. I like to hear that.
And you'd be surprised, because part of the American Express study did last year, part of the result was that young people would rather have FaceTime. They would rather walk into a corporate office than tweet and text others.
Well, I think one of the things that we're missing today with all the technology is the ability to set in silence and go deep on some topics. And to go deep, it takes some time to get there. Yeah. And that's where the real gems and that's where the real gold is. And so few people ever get there because they're distracted by their phone, they're distracted by their computer, they're distracted by a lot of things. And so all of these apps seem, in my opinion, to keep people stuck at the surface and not thinking on a deeper level. And I think that's one of the things that you've been able to do, is go very deep, and I commend you for that. I'm really impressed. Your folks, they must have had some type of conditioning a part to do with this. Is your dad? Did your dad do this? Your mom? Or give me a little bit of a background of how you got to have this perspective that you have, which is very unusual, by the way.
Yeah, I think, my dad is a traditional businessman. He owned his own food distributing company that he sold 20 years ago. And now he's a travel agent. So he's basically retired, but he won't admit it. Mm-hmm. And then his brother is hardcore. He owns the Schawbel Corporation. So my last name, he gets to use my last name. And he just sold part of his company. But I mean, that's a lot of where the entrepreneurship comes from. And then my grandfather on my mother's side, was big into real estate. But honestly, I didn't set out to become an entrepreneur. It happened because I found something that I really cared about, and then I did whatever I could to figure out how I could make money from it, so I could do it full time. And I'm telling you, the lifestyle change. I think people need to start thinking about, what do I want my lifestyle to be like, and then make decisions to be able to pull it off. I think that's the key that a lot of people are missing. They're not a lot of people, especially where I am right now. We have 8 floors of all these young entrepreneurs. A lot of them are just trying to avoid corporate America, or do it because it's the cool thing to do and they'll be respected by their peers or something. Because you can just tell based on the conversations here. I think people need to do it because it's something that they really like and they'll put their heart into, and because they want to create a certain lifestyle that fits who they are, basically. And one of the things I've been thinking about and how to kind of position career management 2.0 really is, career, what it is it's a collection of the decisions you make on a daily basis. That's it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Looking at it from my own perspective, I like nice high-end watches. I like high-end exotic cars, but they don't define me. And I don't wear those in a way that is offensive or in people's face. And that's a kind of part of what I hear you saying, is you can be interested in something, but it's got to come from the core of your being, rather than doing something, rather than owning a watch because it's a cool watch and everyone will think you're cool for it, right?
And the reason for that is because it's how you come off, right? You can genuinely tell that I'm excited about this, I'm interested in it, I'll make the sacrifices, whatever it takes, let's do it. And there's a big difference between someone who's like that and then somebody who's just trying to get a paycheck.
Right.
Huge difference, right? In attitude. And the thing that's most fascinating to me is that the number one thing that recruiters look for when recruiting students, 3 things, that managers are looking for when promoting.
Hey, Dan, you cut out. I'm sorry, you cut out there. You said the number one thing they look for is what?
So the number one thing that college recruiters look for when hiring recent graduates, and one of the top 3 things that managers are looking for when deciding who to promote, is attitude. If you have a positive attitude, it's big time, right? That can really help you get the promotion or get a job in the first place. And the only way to truly have a positive attitude is to be in the right workplace environment that you kind of feel challenged. You're working with people you enjoy working with. You're doing something that plays to your strengths, and it's the right location, right company, etc. So that's part of why I think people my age are jumping from job to job like every 2 years, is because they're trying to find that type of situation. And companies now, they're hiring for cultural fit over any qualifications, because they can easily train you to learn what's necessary for you to do your job. So from your perspective, if you're looking to get a job, you want to choose a company to work for, or create a company that connects with who you are and the type of people you want to surround yourself with, the culture, etc. And if you want to hire people as an entrepreneur, then you want to hire people who really fit in, who have the right attitude, who are really excited about it, who have been tweeting you for 4 months, who will do whatever it takes to be part of your company. Those are the people that you want. And because of the competition to get jobs now, I think companies are just being more picky for those type of people.
Right. I totally agree. Hey, what quote would best summarize your belief or attitude in business?
Well, I think the one I said before is extremely, extremely important, is no one will invest in you unless you invest in yourself first. It's kind of what I live by. If I don't work really hard, why would someone else want to put their money into me? It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
Think about if you're an artist. Why would Def Jam or whomever want to sign you unless you already have an audience of hundreds of thousands of people who come out to watch you play? I mean, you have to already be successful in order to become successful. It's like a catch-22.
Right. Great advice. Hey, how do people connect with you?
Yeah, so you can search my name, Dan Schawbel. That's SCHAWBEL. First website is mine, danschawbel.com. I'm on all the social networks, of course, Instagram, you name it.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Listen, remember that you can find all the links to the books and the resources mentioned here in this show in the show notes. Just go to rockstarentrepreneur.network.com. Now, before I close the show today, I have a quote from the famous Bruce Lee. And the quote reads, "The successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus." Think about it. This is Travis Lane Jenkins signing off for now. To your incredible success. Take care, my friend.